Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Now, last week, Westminster was rocked by Robert Jenrick's defection to Reform after he was quite unceremoniously sacked by Kemi Badenoch. But in his defection speech, the former Shadow Justice Secretary did slam his former party.
The Conservative Party in Westminster isn't sorry. It doesn't get it. It hasn't changed. It won't change. It can't change.
Well, I'm very pleased to be joined in the studio now by Reform MP Robert Jenrick. Robert, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Good to be here in my new incarnation.
I was going to say, it's my first time I've introduced you as a Reform MP, but elaborate on that for us then. You say they're not sorry, they haven't changed. Well, what do you mean by all of that?
Well, look, after the last general election, I went straight out and said that the Conservative Party failed in government on immigration, on the economy, on public services, and it had to be painfully honest about the mistakes it had made, and that was the first step in beginning to regain people's trust. Here we are, almost 2 years later, and with some honourable exceptions, I do not believe the Conservative Party is sorry for the mistakes that it made in office. It's, broadly speaking, got the same cast of characters, sat there at the top table as who made those mistakes, and time and again, I've seen instances where people just cannot internalise the fact that the party let us down. And if you won't do that, then why on earth would we trust those people to run the country in the future?
Could you give us some cast iron examples on this? I mean, an obvious one for me would be that Kemi Badenoch now says that she will leave the ECHR. A Tory government would leave the ECHR. So, I mean, what are you saying, that you just don't believe that?
I think Kemi believes that, but I don't think many other people do. We sat around the shadow cabinet table of people who said to me, when I was standing for the leadership, and I know that's sort of ancient history now, but who said to me, I will never serve in a shadow cabinet of someone who wants to leave the ECHR. You've got people like Jesse Norman, who said he took to Twitter and said it was mendacious and wrong to do that. You know, on other issues as well. I remember writing an article about taking the foreign aid budget, or part of it, and spending on defence, because we needed to back up our troops and our armed forces. And one of the whips, now the chief whip of the Conservative Party, messaged me to say, you're totally out of order. There's a special place in hell for you.
What?
If you make an argument like that. If you look at what happened most recently over Christmas.
Sorry. So the chief whip, the now chief whip of the Tory party, just remind me who they are.
Rebecca Harris.
Rebecca Harris, right. She said there's a special place in hell for you if you want to remove bits of the foreign aid budget.
I published an article, a very reasonable article, which incidentally is now the policy of Keir Starmer, as well as the Conservative Party, that we should take some of the international aid budget and spend it on defence. And the person who's now the chief whip, the enforcer of discipline around the shadow cabinet table and in the Conservative Party, messaged me with a litany of insults, saying that I should never say that again and that there was a special place in hell for anyone who acted like that. I mean, I do not believe that people who said things like that just a matter of months ago have had some kind of incredible conversion and change. And let me give you an example just from the other day. At Christmas, we were all appalled by the fact that El Fattah, this Egyptian extremist, had been brought into the country, and the Prime Minister was on Twitter celebrating this was a wonderful thing to do, a triumph of British diplomacy. And I was appalled, like most people were in the country. You probably were as well. I took to GBNews and to social media to say that this was a disgrace, this man should be deported as quickly as possible. To my surprise, I then started to get complaints from people within the Conservative Party who said, Rob, you can't say things like that because it's drawing attention to the fact that the last Conservative government gave this man a passport, made him a British citizen. So will you pipe down, please? And, I can give you many other examples, and I've said some of them over the course of the last week. But if the party isn't sorry, can't accept it made mistakes, is so much a prisoner of its past that it can't confront things like El Fattah or Chagos or the other issues that it clearly was a part of, it will never be in a position where it can regain the trust of the British public. And if by some miracle it was in government in the future, the British public should expect it to make all the same mistakes all over again.
OK, well, what I will say is, whilst I don't disbelieve you, of course, the chief whip of the Tory party is not here to defend herself. But you mentioned there about some of your former shadow cabinet colleagues. I mean, one of the criticisms of reform would be that they don't yet have a top team, right? They don't have a cabinet at the moment. So, you know, why should people believe reform have got a better team than the Tories? At least they know who the Tory shadow cabinet are.
Do they? Do you think most people can name the Conservative shadow cabinet? I'm not going to test you, Patrick, because you're probably the one man in Britain who does know some of them. But I would say that you've got in Nigel, obviously, somebody who has been at the heart of British politics for all of my adult lifetime. But alongside him is now got Zia Youssef, incredibly talented businessman.
Friends now?
We are. We had dinner last night, actually, and got on extremely well. You've got Richard Tice, you have myself, you know, there are Danny Kruger. There's a number of people now, and it's a growing team that will continue to develop over the months to come. Nigel knows he's got to build a strong team, and that is beginning to happen. And we want to put together a very strong team, and with serious, credible plans as to how you actually turn the country around. Because if there was a reform government, I hope there is, after the next general election, it can't be like the last Conservative government, which let people down, or this Labour government, which has also badly let people down. If the public vote for change in 2029, and I believe they will do, I'm certain they'll vote for change, then if they get a reform government, it's got to be change that's actually delivered this time, particularly on the things that matter. Immigration and raising people's wages and living standards after 20 years in which it's all stagnated and people feel so poor right now in the country.
All right. I mean, you mentioned things like Chagos, a few other things, obviously, that the Conservative Party are responsible for. If there is a criticism of you, it would be that you stuck around for quite a while, weren't necessarily as vocal as you could have been over the last 14 or so years.
Well, I don't think anyone says I haven't been vocal in the last 2 or 3 years. Most time people were saying you're too frank, or, you know, you're being too public in your criticisms of the last Conservative government. Sure, perhaps I should have said some of these things even sooner, but when you're in government, you're bound by collective responsibility, you're trying to do a good job in the role that you have. But certainly when I was Housing Secretary, I fought to get more homes built, was immensely frustrated that the last Conservative government backed down on that, which has hurt young people and all those people who depend on those jobs, like brickies and plumbers and builders across the country. And in particular at the Home Office, with Suella Braverman, I fought a one-year battle, really, to get the small boats down. We had some success, got them down by a third. No one's done that before or since. And we did secure the big changes to legal migration that are now starting to have effect. But above all, I resigned when I couldn't get what I really needed out of Rishi Sunak. I said no, went onto the backbenches and started fighting there.
You mentioned Suella. I mean, the obvious thing for her to do, presumably, is join reform.
Well, look, I don't know what she intends to do, so I don't want to put words into her mouth, but I have the highest respect for Suella. She was right on the big issues, and I'd love to see her play a more prominent role in British politics.
All right. OK, welcome back. Robert Jenrick is still with us, the Reform MP. Now, Robert, the big news of the day, some of it anyway, was that illegal migrants have now entered this Crowborough base, a former military base. Now, my understanding is that that was, for a period of time, actually a base for some people under the Afghan resettlement scheme. And again, I would say a criticism of you on this kind of, you've had this conversion apparently, would be that I think you champion the Afghan resettlement scheme, and some would say were the initial architect of the migrant hotel disaster. So how would you respond to that?
Not correct. On the first point, I did support the idea that we bring the very small number of brave interpreters who supported our troops in Afghanistan to safety in the UK, and I met a couple in my own constituency. But I certainly did not support the idea that that has to turn into tens of thousands of people. And both Suella and I rigorously opposed that in the Home Office, to the point where we refused entry to any of those people until ultimately both of us left office, and then it all started to spiral afterwards. On the hotels, look, I hated the hotels as much as anybody else, and I worked night and day to the point where we could actually start closing them. In the end, I set in train the closure of the first 100 of the hotels. But why did the hotels exist? Because the numbers were out of control. And you're only going to get a grip on that. It doesn't, they could be on military bases, they can be in hotels, they could be in HMOs, they could be on the streets. That's not the point. The point is, how do you stop them coming in the first place? And it was obvious to me the only way you do that is detain and deport them, leave the human rights treaties like ECHR.
Yeah.
And that's why I campaigned. Ultimately, that's why I resigned, because I couldn't persuade Rishi to do that. And I knew that we would just be trapped in this cycle of always dealing the symptom of the problem, not getting to the crux of it.
Another big issue, of course, is legal immigration. And Priti Patel, maybe doesn't get quite enough criticism. Some would say for it. She's pretty defensive, actually, of her record there. She's now, of course, still around that shadow cabinet table. Is she the kind of person that you mean when you talk about, the Tories not changing?
Well, yes, and I don't mean this. I don't want to be disrespectful to people because, look, there's lots of good people in the Tory party, and then, there are nice, decent people, but you have to be held to account for your record in office. And I can't see how the Conservative Party can credibly claim to have changed when the architect of the points-based system, which I would argue has done so much harm to our country, meant that millions of low-wage, low-skilled people have come in, cost British taxpayers billions of pounds, put pressure on housing and public services, undercut the wages of British workers, is both unrepentant and sat at the top table as the second or third most important person in the Conservative Party. That suggests the Conservative Party is the same old party as the one that made those mistakes. And I struggle to see how the British people should be able to trust the party in the future. In fact, I don't. I do not trust the Conservative Party on immigration, and that's one of the reasons why, ultimately, I took the very difficult decision to join Reform. OK,
just on that, because you were obviously serving under Kemi Badenoch. Now you've decided to go and, I suppose, serve under Nigel Farage. Some people will say, well, look, Kemi has been in government. She is someone who's, had a long history of actually being in the House of Commons, being in Parliament, all of that stuff. Nigel Farage has not. So why do you think that Nigel's better than Kemi?
Well, if you ask me who would I like to see as Prime Minister, Keir, Kemi or Nigel, in an instant, I would say Nigel. He's a strong leader. He has been consistently right on some of the issues that are now at the absolute centre of our politics. He was calling out the dangers of mass migration when I was a teenager, when Tony Blair opened the doors to mass migration from the accession countries in the EU. He was out there, with GBNews' help, in the Channel, raising the alarm about small boats. People were laughing at him at the time. They're certainly not laughing now, but also on net zero, on deregulation, how you get living standards up in this country. And so he has a consistency which is very important in politics. And having observed prime ministers up front, what you want are people who have conviction and who are actually going to do what they say they're going to do, not back down. Well, and Nigel, I think, is certainly that.
What are the criticisms?
I would also just say, having only observed him now for a week in Reform, and, you can't read too much into that, and you know this, perhaps you know him better than me, really, from your time here at GB News, I would say he's immensely hard-working. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is he a harder worker than Kemi? Because I'm not going to compare him to other people. Might have been unfairly criticised. But I don't like lazy people. I admire people who work very hard. And being Prime Minister is a slog. There's no job like it. And you need to have somebody who is absolutely determined to fix the country. And I have more faith in Nigel than anybody else in politics today. If you could pick what role in Reform you get now... You're tempting me to say that. Well, everyone wants to know. People want to know. You're going to have to wait to see, because it's ultimately Nigel's decision, and I've talked stuff through with him, but he's going to make his own choice in the next few weeks. And then I think he will have, exactly as you asked earlier, a proper shadow cabinet, which is what Reform needs. OK. Now, look, I know we touched on this slightly earlier because you raised it, Yusuf, but I just want to bring a couple of things up to you, because I think people again are interested in this, to be honest with you. So we've got Layla Cunningham, who is Reform's candidate for the Mayor of London. I'm sure you've seen this, but here it is again.
Would you like to see Rob Jenrick join the party?
Why? Because we're talking about women?
No, you don't want Rob Jenrick.
No. Hang on. Right. I think Nigel Farage wouldn't mind Rob Jenrick.
I mean, this is my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Why not?
It was under him that the hotel migrant situation flourished. We had peak amount of hotels. I don't feel that the Conservatives have atoned for their sins.
So that was before your defection. It's quite difficult to come back from that, isn't it, really, as a personal... No, I don't know. Look, there's a lot of rough and tumble in politics. People have said a lot worse about me than that. She probably, in fairness, didn't know exactly what had happened, in that
I walked into the Home Office. It was a complete bin fire. The numbers were out of control. They had to house them somewhere. And then over the course of the year, we actually got it in a much better state. We signed the deal with Albania. The numbers fell by a third. And then before I left office, we were able to begin to close all the hotels.
OK.
But I've had good conversation with her, and I wish her well, because... You know,
she's your Mayor of London.
Well, no, but think of the issues I've campaigned on over the last year, like fare dodging, shoplifting, you know, crime in London. London is crying out for a strong person like Layla to be getting a grip on crime and law and order.
Very quickly, because we've got a few seconds. How did you and Zia bury the hatchet then? What was said?
Look, we had a very good dinner, and I think we are going to get on very well. And I admire Zia because he has a fierce view that the last Conservative government let down the country and betrayed the people who voted for it. And I think he is perhaps surprised that our view aligns more than he thought.
All right, Robert, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.